Welcome one and welcome to the greatest show of them all. It is the NFC East Mixtape, which you can listen to on any one of SB Nation's NFC East blog podcast networks. You can also watch this show on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel or the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. His name is Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. My name is RJ Ochoa from Blogging the Boys. BLG, a little bit of a late resolution into the year, but I know that I have a tendency to speak very quickly. So I'm working on that, which is why I'm trying to let things marinate a little bit more.
That's a good one, as I try to do that too.
The people who are on a 1 1/4 or 1.5 speed are like, did I turn this off? Did I go back? So yeah,
that's definitely, it's hard because we love what we talk about, so we get so excited and like eager to talk about it. So I think you lose that pacing because you're just so excited to get your point out. I do that, at least. I'll speak for myself. I trip over my words too. Before we start today's show, show's already started, but before we get into really division order, before we get into the meat of the episode, I have a couple things to present up top. This is where you would ask me.
Hold up. So just to be clear, this is not NFC East related, because if it involves any NFC East team,
but it's not like division. It's not like, all right, now we're starting and we're going in division order and we're talking about everything. It's more.
I hope this isn't a filibuster way to get the Eagles in first.
It's more of a something we've talked about before on the show. All right, here, let me play you this clip from the Office Ladies podcast with Jenna Fisher and Angela from Pam and Angela from The Office.
So Angela doesn't get a last name mention, only Jenna Fisher.
What's her last name again? I forget. Sorry, Angela. Anyway, I like the podcast a lot, but this is uncanny.
Her name is her last name is Kinsey. Angela Kinsey.
That's what I thought. Okay, are you ready?
That's what you mean. That's what you thought. I hate when people do that. That's what I thought when they didn't offer that whatsoever.
I knew it all along. This is where you ask me if I'm ready, and if I say no, it doesn't really change anything. So, are you ready? Okay, yes, you are. You ready? Here.
Well, let me tell you, a scientist named Leah Boker, who was a researcher at University of Cologne's Social Cognition Center, did an experiment.
That's a tongue twister.
It is a tongue twister. Leah took German soccer fans and had them watch videos of their biggest rival, who is the Dutch soccer team, missing penalty kicks. And she tracked their response. Then she showed them videos of the German team succeeding at penalty kicks. And what Leah found was that viewers were happier watching the Dutch team fail than they were watching their own team.
Oh, the most embarrassing thing you've ever done.
Interesting. Interesting. Psychologically proven that it is more fun to watch your hated rival lose than it is, or it can be at least, than watch your own team win.
What podcast speed do you have them on?
Yeah, sorry, I meant to turn that back down to 1. I have them at 1.5. I listen to everything at 1.5, other than I'll go the occasional 2 if I'm trying to like finish a podcast where I don't really necessarily care what they're talking about anymore. But I don't want to turn it off in case there is something that I would be interested in. Yeah, so I'll ramp it up to 2 if I have like 2 minutes left in the podcast sometimes, and I kind of just want to. I'm not even like really actively listening. I kind of just have it on, but mostly a 1.5. So that was number 1.
I am a 1.25 person. I can't do the 1.5. It's too difficult. But so what Brandon is referencing, for those who aren't as pathetic as this mindset offers, now a year,
science. It's not even opinion.
Now a year and change ago, we did a podcast with our buddies from the Birds and Boys podcast, KMS and Aiden. And you offered something that all 3 of us disagreed with you on. So not just me, not trolling or anything like that. Both of them, and Aiden is an Eagles fan, to be very clear, which is the whole premise of their show that we allegedly ripped off. But you told us ahead of the Cowboys-Eagles Christmas Eve game a year ago, where the Cowboys won, that you take more joy and satisfaction in the Cowboys losing than you do the Eagles winning, which was a weird thing to say. But I guess you have, I wouldn't even say 2 people, but some data collection that agrees with you.
I don't think I said that. I said it can be more enjoyable sometimes, which is true, and brings me to my second thing. This is an Apple Podcast review, 5 stars, please. And make sure, if you've already done it on Blogging the Boys, go over to Bleeding Green Nation, leave a 5-star review. If you've done it on Bleeding Green Nation, go over to the Blogging the Boys, leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done either, then do both. This comes from 12746392642 on January 15th. I love these guys as much as I wish Apple Podcast would show the whole title. I can't see it on my mobile here. Anyway, the review is my go-to pod for insightful and intelligent discussions related to the Birds, Boys, and the other two dumpster fire franchises in the NFC East. BLG and RJ are smart, funny, and respectful of each other. Debatable. Despite their opposing fan perspectives, their dynamic is a refreshing contrast in sports talk to loudmouth talking heads screaming at each other. And as a man learning to evolve past the toxic masculinity I grew up in and sometimes perpetuated, I appreciate their emotional maturity and vulnerability. It's so great hearing RJ publicly tell a friend that he loves him. I appreciate RJ so much that he has done the unthinkable and made me think more of Cowboys fans as a whole. No longer can I view them, all of them, as Yosemite Sam. They're comprised of smart and decent lovers of football too. That being said, BLG is right, and watching Dallas once again choke in the playoffs last night was more fun than any Eagles win. I imagine that only an NFC East fanatic can understand this, and if you're such a person, this is your podcast. Really strong review. Great review. Good vocab.
Great review. Kind of the quintessential NFC East mixologist review where it's like love, but I really hate the like team that I'm not a fan of and hope that you experience nothing but sports sadness. But on a human level, really rooting for you, but also rooting for your sports teams to provide you total and complete misery. So that's what we do around here.
Did you see my Raising Cane's cup, by the way?
I did. Do you not have the Post Malone one? Did you know about this?
The Cowboys one? No, I don't have the Cowboys.
Did you know about it though?
Cup. You showed me.
Yeah, and about the Post Malone Cowboys specific Cane's establishment.
Do you know Luke Foods? Luke Foods?
No,
like he's like a TikTok guy. No, I was watching some of his reviews, and he went to Cane's recently, and it got me jonesing for Cane's. Also, he got one of these filled with cane sauce to dip everything in, like a whole cup, a whole soda cup.
Okay.
Strong.
What is in yours?
I did half tea, half lemonade. Arnold Palmer edition.
Okay. That's fine. I think you got to go full sweet tea. Shout out to my friend from college, Allison. She taught me a hack with Cane's, and it's you get the sandwich. Some people, I think everybody orders like the box. You get the sandwich because you get 2 pieces of toast. You just take it apart. You get the same amount of chicken. And you get to sneak that second piece of bread in there, or third if you swap out the bread for coleslaw.
I did the Keniac combo. I swapped out the slaw, which I'm never like a big coleslaw guy. It doesn't do. It's just there. It doesn't really I have no opinion really on it. It's just existing.
I'm not a fan of coleslaw in general, so what can you do?
I swapped out the coleslaw for an extra cane sauce.
Oh, the sauce is okay. There's I'm obliged to mention that in College Station, Giga Maggie's, there is a hometown version of Cane's. It's called Lane's, and there are at least there were 2 during my day
Creative.
in the College Station area, and the main one, because like I said there were 2, but the main one was literally next door to a Cane's. And it's I don't know if it's obvious, but it's the exact same concept. It's chicken tenders, fries, toast, and a special Lane sauce that comes in a styrofoam box. But it's it's a College Station thing, so most students and locals obviously prefer it. Support a local business. Nothing against Cane's or anything like that. But there were people, I had friends and classmates and whoever that preferred elements of each. So they would go to both because they were right next to one another, and they would say like, "Oh, well, I like the chicken better here, or the fries better, but the sauce here and the toast better, and whatever." And they would come up with their own amalgamation of things, and the tea and whatever the case may be. So
Do you have a fast food combo like that where like you would ideally want one thing from one place, and they have to be close by or closest by, and they can't be driving like 20 minutes apart? Fast food doesn't hold up like that. Is there anything that's like close that you would get one thing, or sometimes you get those places that have like the KFC Taco Bell combo, or like something like that in one location that you can kind of get wild, I guess, if you really want to?
Yeah, I'm not one of these people. I'm just gonna go to one place and get the food.
I agree. I mean, obviously most of the time that's convenient, but like with In-N-Out, and we talked about this before, the fries just being what they are. I had them well done recently, like the last time I had it, and it definitely was better. It did salvage them a bit, but it's still just not like a good fast food fry the way I think almost any fast food fry, like Wendy's, Burger
Wendy's
King.
has-
I'm not even the biggest McDonald's fry guy. I actually like them a lot less than other people do, but I'd still rather have them than In-N-Out.
Wendy's in general pretty underrated, I think, when it comes to fast food. And I don't know the
Agree.
last time I had a burger from McDonald's. Whenever I go, I get a 10-piece, and something about that hits just right. I will offer this before we get into the football of it all. Have you seen McMillions before?
No.
Highly, highly, highly recommend to you and to anyone. It's a documentary. I think it's on Max. Now, my wife and I watched it right at the beginning of COVID. It's like 9 episodes maybe, and it's a little bit long, but I mean, you can crush it in a weekend if nobody's doing anything. And it's all about the Monopoly game that McDonald's used to have, and it's all about how this was like a front for like the mafia. But it's really, really fascinating. I would offer it's one of the more interesting documentary series I've ever watched. So give it a whirl. McMillions. Super Bowl 58 is set, BLG. And I guess we can offer some championship game thoughts before we get into the divisional news. And we will go in order, even though you tried to filibuster, like I said.
No, I didn't. That's also not the right use of that word. I wasn't trying to buy time.
I mean,
I wasn't
maybe
trying to. You're accusing me of trying to shoehorn the Eagles in, which I'm not doing.
I mean, filibuster still works. It's maybe not the most.
If you're saying I'm
maybe not the best possible word, but it definitely works. Anyway. Because what would have happened is we would have kept talking about it, and then you would have just transitioned to the Eagles. That's the filibuster.
That's not true. It's
anyway,
a bad recovery attempt by you.
How do we feel about this? Was the least preferred option. We discussed this with Steven Serta on TGI Football that we wanted to see. We wanted Ravens, Lions. Although Steven covers the Chiefs for Arrowhead Pride, so I think we're both happy for him. That
we were talking about independent of who we cover.
And I think it's clear that we're both rooting for the Chiefs. Second year in a row for Cowboys fans. But you had a tweet that did not age well as the NFC Championship game wore on.
It's not about aging well. It's not. It's just a joke.
I heard from our buddy Stats about your tweet.
Weren't going to win the game.
I'll just say that I heard from our buddy Stats.
They didn't even cover.
By the way, everybody should go to the Gold Standard Network, subscribe to their YouTube channel.
Of course.
Go 5-star rating, review
Support
their podcast feed. Stats is heading out to Vegas. And so he's been on our radio show, by the way, in San Antonio. And so I'm sure we'll talk to him again throughout the week. But very, very happy for Stats that he gets to experience this. And
he's the one 49ers related person I'm happy for. Yes.
I mean, I'm cool with Kyle Posey. I'm happy for Kyle.
I like KP. Of course. Yeah.
Our friends and coworkers, but anyway,
the obvious ones, yes, but especially Stats.
Right. So how do we feel? What NFC East angles, takeaways do we have on it being 49ers Chiefs for the second time in a 4-year span?
Well, I'd like to talk about the Baltimore
5 year,
Ravens.
second time in 5 years. Even though, last year there was one fan base that got that wrong. I won't point any fingers, but second time in 5 years. But anyway, the Ravens. So can I tell you about this? Is NFC East related? Did you?
I'm sorry, Rachel, but my bit must continue.
Did you see the article that I wrote, by the way, about this?
No.
So you do a great job of cruising around the NFC East blogs. I just slacked it to you. As I watched the Ravens, and this, you're just gonna laugh at this, I know that, but all I could think about was the Cowboys, and all I could think about was like, man, maybe it is just really, really, really hard. Like, this is a really difficult thing to do. It's really, really, really hard to reach the Super Bowl. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that Lamar failed and the Ravens failed and, Todd Monken failed and Zay Flowers failed like 4 times. I mean, and like what was such an incredible season that, we'll have a really hollow feeling MVP next week is just gone. I mean, it's just meaningless now. It's so frustrating. And I can completely identify with that as a Cowboys fan. And so I really feel for the Ravens. They had their worst hour at the worst possible time.
So I know something about this a little bit because when it comes to like empty MVPs, because that's, how it felt last year when Joel Embiid won the MVP. And it was just like, well, This is nice in the moment. And I'm glad he did. I wanted him to win it. I'm still like appreciative of that in the bigger picture. But I mean, when you blow a 3-2 lead, when you have a game at home in game 6, like they did against the Celtics, and you can never get past the second round. It's like, what does this really mean? What am I really proud of about this?
If I was a Mavs fan, I'm not. I would point out that like right after Joel had the 70-point night, that Luka completely dominated it. So, but whatever. So Dallas dominates Philly once again.
Okay. Yeah. You don't even like them. So anyway.
I don't mind them. But I mean, not my team. But go on.
So with Lamar, here's my thing on Lamar. because I think it gets twisted. And it's like, oh, I hate Lamar. I don't hate Lamar. I'm just been very consistent about how he's an excellent regular season player, and he sucks. He SUCKS sucks in the playoffs. He sucks in the playoffs, and no one wants to talk about that. All everyone wants to do in the regular season, especially, but oh my gosh, like and look, maybe I'm too guilty of paying attention to what others are saying, but I feel like the Ringer, sorry to drop the Ringer, is especially like guilty of this, of like creating this hype machine around Lamar. It's not even that I dislike Lamar. I just like the discourse that gets surrounded by him and certain other players. I think Dak kind of falls into that. With Lamar especially, it's funny to me because I'll be not even watching a Ravens game. I'll be watching whatever 1 o'clock game, Eagles aren't playing. I'm checking Twitter, and Twitter's like, oh my gosh, Lamar, like we're blessed to watch him. It's just like a joy. What a gift to humanity that we get to watch Lamar Jackson. And I checked the Ravens box score, and it's like Lamar has 1 touchdown, 1 interception for like a 86.2 passer rating. I'm like, what are we talking about here? And in the playoffs now, he has 9 touchdowns total, including rushing. He has 9 turnovers.
So now rushing touchdowns don't count. Interesting.
No, I'm saying they do count.
Okay.
I'm saying rushing.
No, but I mean that sounded like you were diminishing them. Like, oh yeah.
No, I'm just saying like altogether, I am including all his touchdowns, and I'm also including all his turnovers. 9 touchdowns, 9 turnovers, a passer rating around like 76. He has 3 losses at home. You're the number 1 seed twice, and you lost at home.
And you've lost to the Titans, lowly Titans. Although, I mean, kind of a hot team, but still, lowly Titans. You lost to the Bills, so like kind of hard to argue against, for you against that team. And now you lost to the Chiefs. So
I don't want to hear you didn't get defensive support either. You know how many points that the Ravens have allowed in Lamar's playoff games?
I understand your
number.
point.
Guess the number.
Look,
no.
Number. Look, this isn't about the AFC North mixtape. I get your point is well heard. We have another game to get to. But what I would offer,
this is going to tie into the NFC East.
What I would offer is everybody has this.
You have to let me finish my point.
Go ahead.
Guess how many points the Ravens defenses have allowed in Lamar's playoff games? 18. They've allowed 18 points per game. You know how many he's put up per game? 13. That's pathetic.
Okay,
that's pathetic. I don't want to hear him celebrated. The postseason matters when we evaluate.
I agree with you, but like
now,
you have to apply whole context. Is it Lamar's fault that Zay Flowers had a meltdown and caused a fumble at the end zone?
Of course not. No. Is it his fault he threw an interception when he had a chance after that? Is it his fault they only put up 10 points?
We can have the conversation. But as somebody who has hyped up Justin Herbert endlessly, Lamar has an incredible resume relative to Justin Herbert. So that's what I was going to say. Everybody has this person. Everybody has the quarterback who people hype up that they get annoyed about. And for a lot of people, it's Lamar Jackson. For a lot of people, it's Dak Prescott. For a lot of people, it's, I'm sure, Jalen Hurts. For a lot of people, it's Justin Herbert. Everybody has the thing that annoys them. It's the same thing.
Justin Herbert played well in the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson can't even get to the championship game.
That's one of the 3 playoff games, 4 or 5 playoff games that Jalen Hurts has played. The only one that he has played well in.
Matters. Being able to see your quarterback play at a championship level.
If you're going to kill Lamar for the interception, Jalen had the fumble that lost them the game.
Okay,
he literally had the fumble that lost them.
You're right. The totally equivalent, 100%.
No,
here's the thing.
Apply whole context. It can be true that Lamar had an MVP season, is amazing, rightfully deserves all sorts of praise, and was awful in a moment that really, really, really mattered.
But consistently is awful in the playoffs.
He was amazing the week before against Houston. He was incredible.
That's his one good playoff game out of 6 tries.
I mean, no, you just used
every
the word
other game
consistent.
sucks.
That is literally an inconsistency.
1 out of 6 games.
Anyway,
that's his playoff track record.
The Chiefs are inevitable.
It is not that different than Dak Prescott, who also celebrated so much in the regular season. And then,
by the way,
to be fair to Dak, he's been better than Lamar in the playoffs.
The AFC North will play the NFC East in 2024. So this is going to get squared away one way or another.
I'm sure Lamar will be great in the regular season and beat the Eagles and then do nothing in the playoffs yet again.
That was my point, though, and why I wrote the article. Like, it's not easy to be great in the regular season. Like, people throw that out like you just did. Like, oh, he'll just dominate the regular. Oh, he'll just dominate.
I'm not
for
saying
4
it's
months.
Easy, but we also have to factor it in. We can't just be like, oh, Lamar's so awesome, and then not count the playoffs.
It's worth mentioning that this is a really hard thing to do. They failed. Criticize them all you want. I'm totally down with that. But like, they're not these losers. But it's not this choker just because they had a bad playoff game in the AFC.
But it's not just like, they went toe.
We have to get to the NFC East. We have a whole other game to get to. The NFC game, the NFC Championship game. Do you have a Chiefs take before we move on?
I hope they win the Super Bowl. I know a lot of people have Chiefs fatigue. I don't love the Chiefs, but I don't hate them. I don't really care. They're almost at the point where it was with the Patriots for me. I know like some people wanted the Rams to win that Super Bowl, Sean McVay's first one, where he had the lowest scoring output in Super Bowl history because they didn't want to see the Patriots win again. But like my thing was like Patriots have won so much, this doesn't matter. This doesn't impact anything. Like, okay, well, they won again. Who cares?
That was why when Michael Irvin said he was rooting for the Eagles against the Patriots, that is the one thing I will never. He wasn't alone in that. There were some Cowboys fans because at the time New England only had 5 Super Bowls. So
Eagles fans don't want to hear that. Eagles fans don't want Michael Irvin to root for them.
I'm just contextualizing it. At the time, New England had 5 and Pittsburgh had 6. They were the first to 6. And Dallas obviously has 5. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't want New England to pass the Cowboys. So what? Like, if not beyond the fact that like it doesn't really mean anything, and beyond the fact that Pittsburgh already did, like you can always pass them again. You can't undo a team winning a Super Bowl. You should never, ever, 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 ever want that. So those are my 2 cents. But anyway,
my point with that was that like no one agrees with that. Pretty much, like Eagles fans don't want them rooting for them. You don't want them rooting for them. Yeah.
The NFC Championship game. The Brock Purdy discourse is on a whole different level. Like this is the most obnoxious conversation that anybody has ever anywhere on the internet or otherwise.
Luck is part of winning a championship. And look, the 49ers had bad luck last year, obviously, when they played the Eagles. So maybe
do you want to tell everyone what your tweet was that aged poorly? Or do you
maybe it's not even how did it age poorly? It's just a joke. I didn't say the 49ers are definitely losing this game. The joke is that
the tweet was the 49ers would be at 49-0 on the Lions right now.
It's a commentary on how whiny they were, and it was like, oh, how could they possibly lose a game unless Brock Purdy is hurt?
Ever said, you know what, that is kind of a fair thing to be upset about. You never once said that, and they proved that with their quarterback he can make plays to help them win the game.
Never once said that.
You never ever once said, because I would actually respect.
Well, I'm saying it now. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it sucks. It's obviously
now you're saying it because now you have to say it.
I've said it before.
Called you out.
This is a weird thing to
because you don't like it about.
I understand. Obviously, I can put I'm a very empathetic person, believe it or not. I can put myself in the shoes of the Eagles being in that spot and me not being happy about it. But you know me, I don't just like praise the Eagles no matter what. If the Eagles were acting like the 49ers did after they lost a championship game, I would not feel good about that. I would not be like, this is justified. They should complain all the time.
Complained about the field after losing the Super Bowl. That was totally different.
That is not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all.
The pod and
not
the
kettle. Same thing.
Interesting.
After in the immediate aftermath of the game, they were nothing but grateful and graceful, whatever the word is, to the Chiefs. James Bradbury took full accountability for the penalty. There was no like, oh, well, the field sucked. No one said that.
It said multiple times if they would have won. They would have. If the game
Who said that. No, they did not.
Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham had one of the biggest loser energy comments about the whole thing.
Why don't you put? First of all, you have to understand the context of Brandon Graham. Literally, just talks trash all the time. Like that's just who he is. It's like it's like when DeMarcus Lawrence
Debo talks trash all the time, but it's not okay.
Brandon, it wasn't just Debo. It was the whole team. It was the whole team. It's Jason Kelce. It's the whole team.
Cashed all the checks they wrote. They talked a lot of crap about the Eagles. They went to Philadelphia. They blasted them in the regular season. I mean, granted, Big Dom helped out. And then they won the NFC. And they almost threw it away. It was really funny when they were down 24-7. But do you think, put yourself in your own shoes pre-2017, do you think Lions fans are grateful to have experienced this? Or are they like, oh, no, the pain is way too much. Like, no, I wish, I mean, it's not a serious question, but, you get my point.
Well, my serious answer to your non-serious question is that I've said this before. No one is ever like, oh, I'm so glad we lost and didn't get that. No one ever says that. No one's like, I'm glad we didn't get to the championship game. That's not a real thing. No one ever feels that way. It's easy to say that in the moment. That's like a coping mechanism, a part of grief, bargaining. That's a stage of grief. It's bargaining. Sure. But yeah, I don't buy that. My friend Alex is a big Lions fan. I probably brought him up before. He was enjoying this ride. He was like every step of the way, he was not expecting the Lions to win the Super Bowl. So he was just like, hey, whenever, like, this is great. And if it ends, it ends. Oh, well. But yeah, obviously it's heartbreaking. But I do think Lions fans are happy. They saw it. Come on. Like, to not see a playoff win in whatever many years since 1991.
32, yeah.
It's worth it.
What's your take on the Dan Campbell thing?
Getting too much blame. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I think and obviously the biggest mistake is the end of game. Shouldn't have run the ball there. That was an insane decision, I think. And if you are going to run it, you can't call the timeout.
We power ranked the decisions on
I heard that.
Monday Football Monday.
That's the most egregious one.
Agree that that's the most egregious. I think the second most egregious is not going for the field goal. I'm sorry, kicking the field goal at the end of the first half. Because if you're going to be this dude, be it the whole way through.
That's tough. I think that's a little bit tougher because you can go up guaranteed 3 possessions is a big deal though.
Then why turn it down twice when you have the opportunity in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, again, not.
That's what I'm saying. Like those are conflicting ideologies. That's why I have a problem with them.
I'm mad about the discourse being like they lost the game because he was aggressive and goes for it in 4th down. When in reality, like again, as JP talked about, the bigger issue, like the drops and a deep, interception turning into a touchdown, basically. Like those are the bigger issues.
That's where I think we're unfair, positively and negatively, to people like Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy. Lamar, it's just he lost the playoff game when it's like, well, Zay Flowers like completely melted down. That's one moment. Granted, Lamar failed in many others. And with Brock Purdy, it's like, yeah, Brock is awesome. Brock is clutch. Brock is whatever. You're right. Brock is totally responsible for the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble, for the Josh Reynolds drop, for the crazy Brandon Ayuk 51-yard reception that actually hit a Lions defender in the face, right? Like we don't have to just pick one moment and extrapolate it and it be the take. But go Chiefs. It's really the main takeaway.
I mean, the quarterbacks get paid a lot of money for a reason. They get paid a lot of money you can't pay, and this applies to Jalen Hurts too when people want to defend him. And I'm not saying it's all on Hurts, but it can't be like I think people want to treat quarterback like, oh, it's a small factor. Like it's a tiny factor. No, it's a significant factor. When you pay a guy $250 million, it's a significant factor. It's not a significant factor.
I don't know if you saw this since we started. The Pittsburgh Steelers are hiring Arthur Smith to be their offensive coordinator. I'm
glad the Eagles didn't hire him.
Well, let's get into new coordinators, things like that. Let's take a very quick break. Brandon, say we're going to break.
We're going to break.
We're back. During the break, Brandon, you told me you learned how to break dance.
Man, I am not athletic or quick enough to do that, definitely.
The Dallas Cowboys are still waiting on learning the fate of Dan Quinn, at least
I don't think he's going to get hired.
I don't either, but I'm just laying out the news. I mean, the situation. It's Tuesday lunchtime for us. I don't, but I mean, they're still waiting. I mean, the only openings at the moment are Seattle and Washington. And I think we've all kind of presumed that Ben Johnson's going to Washington. So now that can officially happen potentially. Obviously,
I don't know.
Now that the Lions
you saw the
done.
Schefter thing, right? Like it was like Schefter basically said there's a lot of assumptions that Ben Johnson's going to Washington and Dan Quinn's going to
That's what I'm saying. Like that has been the general assumption. And so we'll see. But
and he said one of those things is definitely or probably not going to happen.
So we'll see. I mean, it could be Dan Quinn. If it is, the Cowboys need a defensive coordinator. And on
baby.
What I'm trying to remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. I think it was Saturday. No, I can't remember what day it was. But Saturday. No, it was
very
Sunday.
delicious.
No, it was Saturday. I really can't remember. It was one of the days of the weekend.
Tell us who it is, RJ. Tell us who the Cowboys defensive coordinator is.
But for the first time, almost 2 weeks after the season finally ended for the Cowboys, a name emerged as a would-be Dan Quinn replacement.
Oh my gosh, who is it?
That had not happened. There had not been a single, except for like internal discussions, right? Like people who are on the staff, like, oh, maybe this person could be promoted. In terms of external potential hypothetical options, and nobody had been brought up. So of course, because the mixtape deserves content. Of course, the first external person to be thrown out as an option was Ron Rivera, who, I mean, I'm gonna still trash. I mean, I have been extremely and extraordinarily consistent about this. I think you would support that. From really day one of the mixtape, I've trashed and trashed and trashed and trashed. I've mentioned how I think there's now 5 teams who have won a division with a sub 500 record. I think counting last year's Bucks, maybe 6 now. But either way, it's a handful, so to speak. Ron Rivera has been the head coach of 2 of them. Like he's I think those are 2 of his 4 division titles. I mean, like he is the luckiest coach literally in NFL history in that respect. Yes, the Commanders' defense was kind of nice 2 years ago, but as I talked about last week when he was mentioned as an Eagles candidate for defensive coordinator, last year they were really bad. And you brought up rightfully and fairly in the name of all context that they kind of punted on the season, obviously trading away Chase Young and Montez Sweat. But on the whole, their entire time since 2020 when he took over, they ranked 16th in EPA per play as a defense. 16th, like completely and totally average. This just feels like an underwhelming Cowboys. Well, let's just get the leader of men, the guy who people know, blah, blah, blah. And if this is truly the best that they can do, it serves to the idea that the lame duckness of Mike McCarthy's situation isn't one that, would be hot, young, on the rise people want to be a part of, because you don't know if he's going to be dismissed after or not retained after 2024. So why would you want to tie yourself to that? This is now, I mentioned last week, the only thing I could say positively for Ron Rivera is that it seems like he really just wants to work on football because of the mess, obviously, that Washington was. And I kind of get that. And as we've long said, he seems like an exemplary human being. But I want nothing to do with this. Like, I want zero. I would rather have Nick Sirianni be the offensive coordinator of the Cowboys than Ron Rivera be the defensive coordinator. And it's just how I felt the entire time. So of course this would happen to me, Brandon. Why could I not have anything good in my life? Why?
I love how much you hate it, but I don't think it's as bad as your reaction is warranting. And I've been consistent about this. I said last week, I'm not excited about the idea of Ron Rivera as an Eagles defensive coordinator when it was in play last week, but I think it could be fine because what I think the goal for the Eagles is, and ultimately, obviously, the Eagles hired Vic Fangio. And at the time I said, I don't love the candidate, but I do like the idea. I like the concept of what they're going for, which is bring in experienced veteran defensive coordinator who knows what they're doing on that side of the ball, proven commodity, and maybe it kind of limits your ceiling, and maybe not, but maybe it does. Let's say, it's just for argument's sake, it does kind of limit your ceiling. You're not going to be, Mike McDonald. You're not going to be like this revolutionary thing ahead of the curve in the NFL and an elite defense. But I think the trade-off for that is you're kind of establishing a higher floor for your defense. You're establishing, at least in theory, competency. And I think Ron Rivera does that at a lower scale than obviously someone like Vic Fangio. But I think it would be fine. I don't think it's a move that is pathetic and disqualifying, but it's not one to get super excited about.
I'm so down on this. No. And if the response to my tweet, because it was Ian Rappaport who reported it, and I tweeted out that he had said it. I would say 99% of tweets, and there were a lot of interactions with this were like, this is horrible. They hate me. Why am I cursed? Like everybody's so out on this.
Well, who would you rather have?
I'd rather have Joe Witt Jr., just an internal promotion at that point. Like, especially if it is a lame duck year. This just like, so Ron Rivera is the knight in shining armor who shows up and saves things. He never once, like, consistently got anything out of Chase Young, right? Who, was a failure in Washington, but we agree was like a generational prospect, right? Like that was how people talked about him. And so
some tough run defense from Chase Young on that one Lions touchdown where he's kind of just watches the defender run right by him, or ball carrier.
So Chase's faults are obviously partly Chase's faults.
Yeah.
But Ron Rivera is supposed to be this like developmental, superstar defensive mind, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So like, we're going to hand him the keys to Micah Parsons. You know what I mean? Like after he couldn't get this done with Chase Young, like name.
He'd have him play an off-ball linebacker.
I'm serious. I'm predicting this. If Ron Rivera is the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys in training camp, there will be a quote of like Micah playing some off-ball linebacker and Ron being asked about it and be like, man, he reminds me of Luke Kuechly. Yes, exactly. Like it's exact. Can you not see that happening? Like that.
Yeah, that's why I said it.
I'm so pre-annoyed at this. I'm just.
You're freaking out. But you would rather have Dan Quinn than Ron Rivera, because you've been on the record saying you don't
a lot.
Yeah, you don't want Dan Quinn back.
No, and that's like some people were like, oh, but you don't want Dan Quinn and you don't want Ron Rivera, so what do you want to do? I don't know. Maybe there are more than two human beings on the face of the earth. Like maybe we could possibly look somewhere else other than these two dudes.
I think it's fair to say, maybe you don't know the exact name, but like what kind of person are you looking for? Like throw a concept out. Is it someone who's done it before? Is it maybe someone like who could be the next Mike McDaniel, like Jesse Minter in college or something?
Yeah,
although he's probably going with Harbaugh.
An archetype, the retread, former head coach, leader of men is not working out for you. So you do not need to go that route literally again with Ron Rivera. I will pass. No, thank you. But
just
speaking
like Kellen Moore.
That's what I was about to say. Look, we're on the same wavelength today, except for you're like, oh, Lamar sucks and it's horrible thing. On the subject of pass, the Philadelphia Eagles have two new coordinators. Nick Sirianni has no power, no say, no control whatsoever. Total figurehead of the Philadelphia Eagles organization. Because Vic, man, that's not I don't think you meant it as a compliment, but
no, I didn't.
That's who he is. That really is this. Vic Fangio is his Rod Marinelli, and Kellen Moore is his Scott Linehan. That is who Nick Sirianni is right now. The Eagles do have 2 new coordinators. I'll be straight up and say that when the Fangio thing happened, first of all, I don't know how this isn't tampering. Like, I don't know how it could just be like, oh, I just want to go work for the Eagles. The Dolphins
didn't want to keep him.
I mean, I guess, but
there's enough rumblings around like the players and Fangio didn't necessarily see eye to eye. Seemed to be something of an arranged marriage between Mike McDaniel and Fangio.
The tampering thought, like genesis of that thought for me, stemmed all the way back to what was his official title during the playoffs last year, like advisor or whatever.
Yeah, so he was a consultant, but apparently it was only for the offense. My suspicion / things I had heard, because during the season, our own Michael Kist reported that Fangio was consulting. He said that during the season. Now, Fangio himself said he was only helping with the offense. That's all the reporting. My suspicion is that that's not entirely true, and it was made to be only offense related because they didn't want to make like Jonathan Gannon look bad at all, that he had to kind of like have his hand held a little bit. But I think Fangio was more involved on the Eagles defense last year.
The Eagles?
And he didn't break them. I mean, they broke themselves by promoting Matt Patricia. By the way, Sean Desai, isn't it funny? Like, he's getting like defensive coordinator interviews after.
I hope he's awesome. I hope he's awesome somewhere else.
I think people forgot this. The Eagles played the Cowboys first time, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Rams. And guess how many points the Eagles allowed in the second halves of those games combined? They allowed
13.
6. They allowed 6 points combined in the second halves of those games. I'm not saying Sean Desai was flawless and, he should have stayed or whatever, but like to act like he couldn't do anything is just wrong. It's objectively wrong.
When the Fangio news finally dropped, what I was getting at, I'm a little worried because that's Dak Prescott's kind of kryptonite right now, if there is one. Now, I do think that's a little bit overblown, but in terms of recent, opportunities, he's kind of failed. Obviously, the Miami game this past year on Christmas Eve. Funny how Christmas Eve, is connected to Cowboys and Eagles in back-to-back years. But also, I don't know if you remember, Fangio was the head coach of the Broncos when I talked all that crap about them. And then
That's right.
And then,
about that.
Yeah, and then they destroyed the Cowboys. So that was
the most predictable outcome ever.
That was my Ron Rivera moment when I didn't even know it. But anyway, so he's presented some trouble for Dak Prescott. Is really my point. He's the Olivier Vernon to Dak Prescott's Tyron Smith.
I like the hire because, as I said last week, and I said earlier in the show, I wanted that kind of mold.
I'm sorry, Brandon, but this is a little bit of breaking news.
What's going on?
Because we talked about it. Ben Johnson has informed the Seahawks and Commanders that he's staying in Detroit.
Wow.
So,
huge. That's a big deal. I'm glad the Commanders are not hiring him. Nice. Good. We'll get to that, I guess, maybe we can get more into the Commanders later. Although I wouldn't love if the Commanders hire Mike McDonald, because I do think that would be interesting for them. But anyway, back to Vic Fangio. Again, I think it's just about, and this has been like a common talking point, it's about establishing that baseline of competency. That's what the Eagles are looking for with the Fangio hire. I think it's not about, I mean, if they are an elite defense, great. Of course, that's like the goal in theory, but at the very least, the goal is to be a well-coordinated defense. And that sounds obvious given the name of his position, but we obviously saw last year how things went awry late in the year when they were trying to implement a whole new system on short notice. And we saw things go wrong, obviously. Not that Sean Desai didn't have his highlights, as I mentioned, but also there were issues there, especially against the 49ers and Cowboys at the end, and some talk about things being overcomplicated. Maybe some of that kind of comes with the Fangio system. At the end of the day, it's so much better to have the actual real deal than the imitation of that thing. And I do think there's something to be said. Jimmy Kempski, my BGN radio co-host, did a good job of highlighting how all the Fangio disciples and even Fangio himself have their offense. These aren't like the best defenses in the league. And I think there's something to be said about how teams have had so much time now to prepare for this style of defense with everyone using it, that it's not that they've figured it out and it can't have any success, but it's certainly not ahead of the curve anymore. It's kind of just like they've seen this before. It can be effective. Obviously the players matter. And how Fangio implements it matters. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. But ultimately, I like the Fangio hire. I think I'd be hard-pressed to probably find a candidate that I would have liked better than that. So I'm cool with it.
I mean, the rule of how do your opponents feel, it bothered me. I mean, relative to the Cowboys specifically. And so I think it's a we're taking this seriously move. And even if it is a neutering of Nick Sirianni, which I kind of think it is, and I don't think I'm unique in that. I mean,
no, that's a good point because Sirianni felt the need to like make a change and kind of get involved on the defensive side of the ball last year. Like he was the one apparently that made the change. So now it's kind of just like hands off, like total hands off. Vic Fangio runs the defense. That's it.
Over under for a number for times that Nick Sirianni is seen at a Phillies game this spring/summer.
Well, Vic Fangio is a big Phillies fan. I don't know if you knew
that.
I
know he's from like the area or has family or whatever, but like I'm talking like Nick Sirianni.
Specifically a big Phillies fan too.
Oh, he's like
talked about
he's not like a Sixers fan or something. Like that's his team. Like the Phillies.
I can't speak to what he isn't a fan of, but like he's been on the record. There's an Athletic interview where he talks about the Phillies.
So then he hates the Astros because we beat you in the World Series.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I don't know about Sirianni at a Phillies game. I don't know.
My whole point was I do think this is an offseason of laying low for Sirianni, and I think he might need that. You know, I'm not saying he's going to like hole up.
I don't think he was high profile last year. I don't think he was like everywhere.
He wasn't on like a Johnny Manziel Heisman Trophy tour.
No.
Anyway, Kellen Moore,
the real coordinator of intrigue, because we know what Vic Fangio is at some level, right. But like the question is, who is Kellen Moore? And I guess you should go first because you have more experience with who he is.
So I saw your write-up about this, and you referenced all the DVOA numbers and things like that. I did a hit with our buddy Farzi on Sunday, actually talking about it. That was the Ron Rivera day, because the Ron Rivera thing popped. I had to delay Farzi like 10 minutes so I could write that article.
Mark Farzetta, for those who don't know.
Right. So I think it's important to understand the backstory if you're an Eagles fan, because I think it's also interesting. So Kellen Moore is we talked about Scott Linehan, or I mentioned him. He's a Scott Linehan disciple. Kellen Moore went undrafted at a Boise State, literally one of the most successful and decorated quarterbacks in the history of college football. And Scott Linehan loved him. I mean, like absolutely loved him. So speaking of the Lions, it was with the Detroit Lions. He was there with Matthew Stafford. And when Scott Linehan joined the Cowboys staff, originally as the passing game coordinator and then the offensive coordinator, he brought Kellen Moore as a player to the Cowboys roster. This was still in the Tony Romo era. If you recall, in 2015, when Romo missed 12 games, Kellen got a couple of starts in there. For a while, I think actually until Tua was drafted, Kellen was the last person to throw a left-handed pass in the NFL, or maybe Dez threw one because he threw a touchdown to Jason Witten at one point.
Last quarterback.
Yeah. Anyway, so in 2016, Dallas entered training camp with Romo coming off that season, and Kellen is the primary backup, and Jameel Showers and Dak Prescott as a rookie. And Kellen broke his ankle, and that during training camp, and that vaulted Dak to QB2. Obviously, Romo got hurt, and Romo never got the job back. And so Kellen never really, got anywhere close. But then in 2017, and again, I think all this context is interesting. Kellen was Dak's backup, and the Cowboys had Cooper Rush as then an undrafted free agent rookie, and Cooper beat out Kellen Moore in the preseason. And so Cooper Rush entered, 2017 as Dak Prescott's primary backup, and Kellen was just kind of hanging out on the practice squad because the Cowboys really valued what he brought from a game breakdown standpoint and things like that. And everybody used to hate Kellen Moore because the people were like, why are you keeping this dude on the practice squad? Like, why are you burning this spot? It wasn't until the Eagles, I don't know if you knew this, reportedly wanted to sign Blake Jarwin off of the Cowboys practice squad, that Dallas actually, at that point, Kellen was on the roster. They had to finally just cut Kellen outright to save Blake Jarwin. They promoted him. And incidentally, Philly would go on to draft Dallas Goedert as a result of all that. And that pushed Kellen into the coaching profession. So he wound up coaching not just Dak Prescott, who had beat him out, but Cooper Rush. And that has always, as I look back on it, kind of clouded how we've been able to evaluate Kellen, because it's a weird thing that he had to coach not just one, but two quarterbacks who literally beat him, right? Like that, like how many situations in the NFL can you look at where that's the case?
It's humbling.
Right. And so in 2018, he was the team's quarterback coach. And in 2019 was when Dak really kind of took off as a passer. It was a real different kind of break point for him. And a lot of people have attributed that to what John Kitna offered as his quarterback's coach that season. Somebody who really worked on the fundamentals. Something Farzy asked me was, can Kellen Moore develop Jalen Hurts? And what I told him was, he's never really done that. I mean, like when he got his hands on Dak Prescott as the OC, I mean, Dak was already a well-established NFL quarterback. And obviously Justin Herbert last year, same sort of thing. But I mean, Kellen is, the kind of classic early 2000s college football, want to throw the ball a million times, score a million points. And I know you remember Mike McCarthy's quote at the Combine a year ago, where he said that Kellen just wanted to light up the scoreboard and he wanted to run the ball and everybody focused on that. I've said before, and this just works out that Kellen's now the Eagles offensive coordinator. I think McCarthy was right. I mean, he was proven right. He coordinated a more efficient offense. Now they crashed and burned, obviously, in the playoffs, but and Kellen flamed out with the Chargers. And it's a 1-year sample size, but in the year since, we saw the best season ever from Dak Prescott, and we saw Justin Herbert really inhibited. So it doesn't necessarily suggest that Kellen is an answer to anything, but obviously that could change.
I think that's the case for concern for sure. And I did highlight that. That's the one thing I'm like, well, so on the plus side, inarguably, he was a play caller for some really high level offenses. He's done that. That's on his resume. Also on his resume is that the Cowboys offense got better when he left last year, and not like otherworldly better. And also part of it was, let's admit, we even said last offseason, the offense was expected to get better from a turnover standpoint because Dak had an unsustainably high level of interceptions relative to his entire career. So that was always going to bounce back, probably regardless of even if the play caller got worse, just because of regression to normalization there. So I will say, I heard 2 points from different Eagles podcasts about Kellen Moore and kind of pushing back on the idea of the Cowboys offense getting better. And I want to get your thoughts on these. I know I'm not saying these are legit just because they're presented, but I thought they were interesting points. Number one was our friend Ben Solak from the Ringers Philly Special with Shil Kapadia, kind of talking about
trashed the Ringer already. Yeah.
Who, I mean, again, there's certain obsession with certain players I think goes overboard. I think we can appreciate Lamar.
It was just a joke, but no, you're
anyway.
Right.
He kind of suggested the 2023 offense was more about Dak and CD cooking on their own than like this great schematic revolution advantage, and that McCarthy's stated end of season vision that you kind of just referenced there didn't exactly come to fruition. And on a similar note, Bo Wolf from the PHLY podcast said that Fran Duffy, who, if you don't know who Fran Duffy is, he's like this tape grinder guy that works for the Eagles. It's like on their post-game show. Really good all 22 analysis and stuff. Anyway, he said the Cowboys started to they started out slower on offense last year, which I think, that sounds about right a little bit. And they got back to doing more of some of the Kellen Moore stuff when they started to have more success. So just wanted to get your take on that.
I'm not in a mood this offseason to defend Mike McCarthy the way that I did before, like with a lot of rigor and energy. But man, I mean, it's amazing the lengths that people will go to just completely discredit him. Like to be like, oh, nothing good that happened in 2023 to the Cowboys offense was a result of Mike McCarthy. Like nothing whatsoever. And the only good things that happened were because they did the Kellen stuff.
I don't think that's what they were saying, to be clear. I think the point was Kellen Moore still had influence there, even though he wasn't there.
How could he not? Like, I mean, he was their coordinator for 4 seasons. Although obviously in 2020, Dak missed a lot of time. I think one of the more important things that happened to the Cowboys, and I think this helped Dak and CD, there was this big story that Yahoo Sports did at training camp about how McCarthy was so insistent on the Cowboys wide receivers understanding the timing of Dak Prescott's feet and his leg work. Because it was that lack of understanding or that lack of everyone being on the same page that led to a lot of tip balls and things like that. Because, a half second here, a half second there, you're a half second early, half second late. I mean, that can affect, a tip ball or whatever the case may be. And so that came from Mike McCarthy. And I know that nobody likes to give him credit for anything, but like he does have a history of developing quarterbacks, not just Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott, but Matt Flynn played really well. I mean, he got the best out of Cooper Rush more than Kellen Moore ever did. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Kellen Moore is trash, but I do think that Kellen is somebody who I want to be also very clear. I was upset when the Cowboys, I wasn't upset, but I thought it was the incorrect decision. Although I did couch that by saying you have to see who Mike McCarthy is as a play caller, which I know you understood. Also, by the way, that decision was announced as the Eagles won the NFC last year. So a lot of like weird symmetry and, parallels happening here. But Kellen wanted his foot on the gas all the time. And that sounds like a good thing, but I somewhat understand what Mike McCarthy was saying about how like sometimes you've got to turn. Like it's not a straight race. You know what I mean? It's not a sprint race in F1. It's a track and it's a course, and you have to be able to kind of adjust. And we never really saw that from Kellen. And we did see in 2021 and 2022 specifically, their offense is faded down the stretch. And it never held. And so I fully believe that that there will be some successes, but we have not seen Kellen Moore kind of go wire to wire with a great year as an offensive coordinator so far. But he's very, very, very young, obviously.
Yeah, and that's another part of it. And look, it can't be lost that the Eagles interviewed Kellen Moore for their head coaching position when they hired Nick Sirianni. So, I don't think that's not a factor in terms of if it's clear that, hey, offense is cooking. Hey, like we like what we have going on defense. Head coach isn't really giving us much or is actually a detriment. I don't think it's that crazy. They'd be like, oh, we're just going to make Kellen Moore our head coach and we can retain a lot of what we have here. So I definitely don't think that's like the plan A, obviously. That's not like what you're hoping to do, but I don't think that's not a plan C or whatever. It's some kind of backup plan. So ultimately, I like this better than Cliff Kingsbury. I didn't want Cliff. Gerard Johnson, I'm intrigued by. I think he might have a bright future, but he's like, you fired Brian Johnson, who barely had a lot of experience as a play caller, to hire Gerard Johnson, who's literally never done it. Like that just didn't seem like a realistic move to me, especially if you're putting the emphasis on win now. So again, I don't think like Kellen Moore is a A+ slam dunk hire, but I do like how he has at a very basic level been part of some very elite top of the league offenses. And I think that offers some reason for optimism.
The last thing I would offer on this whole subject, and then we can touch on the Giants and Commanders, but Kellen is only 35. I mean, so he's incredibly young. I mean, like consider that, Brian Johnson, who we'll talk about in a moment, is 37. I mean, so you know what I mean? Like it's I would say an overwhelming majority of Kellen's NFL future is still in front of him. And maybe his age has worked against him, but he's interviewed for a lot of NFL head coaching jobs and not been chosen. Even in the middle of when when his stock was higher, so to speak, right? Because his stock's kind of low right now, but just in terms of his short career. But he even interviewed for the job that went to Nick Sirianni. I mean, when the Eagles were moving on, or had moved.
You did the thing where you did my thing. Where
I was reading it. I was reading a thing about Ben Johnson. Yeah,
that's fair.
But so I mean, I don't know that he screams leader. And that's my assumption based on this phenomenon. And this is one teeny tiny, very specific example. I don't know if you remember in 2021, Mike McCarthy missed a game due to COVID. He was on the COVID list.
No.
The Cowboys went to New Orleans on a Thursday night, and they chose Dan Quinn to be the interim that night, not Kellen Moore. Now, some of that, Dan Quinn's been a head coach before, whatever, blah, blah. But like, if you really thought that Kellen could do it, wouldn't you,
well, the Chargers also didn't do that too, just like when they fired Brandon Staley.
I mean, it's all worth discussing, which is what we just did. So also, I told Farsi this feels so like sometimes when players leave whatever team and they go somewhere, like, I think you can kind of understand it. Like they have personalities that mesh. Kellen is not a Philly person like that. Like he does not, to me, strike the same sort of like intimidating vibe that like your classic Eagles do. This feels in that way like DeMarco Murray going to Philadelphia, like the most square peg round hole. Like this isn't you. Like what are you doing? But maybe it works out. We'll see.
I agree with the characterization of like doesn't seem, but I don't think Philly people want. Well, I think some people might. I don't necessarily want like a Philly person offensive coordinator.
I think
who's just going to run the ball all the time and never pass.
I don't mean that. I mean like Fangio fits the mold to me. Like Fangio's like kind of tough. You know what I mean? Like Kellen hasn't really demonstrated that. I wouldn't go that far. Like that's not what I'm thinking. Like I'm just saying like
lunch pail, hard hat.
I don't know. I mean,
but Vic Fangio's running up the art museum steps and taking pictures in front of the Rocky statue.
It's just some people were like born to be Eagles or born to be whatever, like Cowboys or whatever. And Kellen it feels very, very, very like he was a great Lion and a great Cowboy and great Charger. It fit. This just doesn't fit in my mind, but we'll see. Okay. The Giants have.
I want to give a plug real quick to bloggingtheboys.com, which has an article
Danny
titled
Phantom.
Why the Eagles Should Love What They're Getting in former Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore.
It's worth contextualizing, and the Blogging the Boys audience knows this. Danny is not a big Mike McCarthy fan. And so he's kind of long held serve that, Kellen was the real bones behind the operation. Not to call out Danny. I'm just, if you want the full context, I think that matters.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Last thing on this part. The reaction from Cowboys fans has been mixed. I've seen some people who are like, "Oh, LOL," they're never good luck Eagles, never going to run the ball, blah blah blah. And then other people are like, "I don't know, this might be a good hire for him." So I think it's interesting how the reaction is mixed.
I'm not LOL, but I'm definitely in no way phased. I mean, it's also worth mentioning the Cowboys really stifled Kellen Moore's offense the one time they faced him, which was earlier this season. But I don't
Giants,
think
nothing going on. Still looking for. We are
what was the Kayvon Thibodeau thing you shared?
He said something to the effect of that. They really should have paid Saquon first, which he did include in there. No disrespect to Daniel Jones, but I mean, come on. Like, if you're being like, actually, we should have paid the running back first. Then maybe that's not the most glowing review of your quarterback. But in terms of what's going on the coaching staff search, I'm looking at Big Blue View right now. It says Giants hope to end defensive coordinator search this week. Has been going on for a while. I mean, the Giants got eliminated much sooner than the Eagles did, and the Eagles got their guy quicker. It looks like former Eagles defensive backs coach Denard Wilson still in play there, so we'll see. And then I also see here that worth noting that Brandon Brown, another former Eagle executive, was not selected as the Chargers' new GM to pair with Jim Harbaugh. They're going with Joe Horitz from the Baltimore Ravens instead. So Giants keeping Brandon Brown, who's their assistant GM, and they're still looking for a new defensive coordinator. Don't really see a whole lot of else going on.
Okay. So no real news with the Giants, and this isn't even really Commanders related as much as it's just NFL related. But Ben Johnson, as we touched on,
it is Commanders related. He was the odds-on favorite.
He seemed like a lock to be the Commanders head coach. He won't be anybody's head coach. So two things that have come out since even that news. Just some, if you want to call it context. Adam Schefter tweeted, Ben Johnson was not the head coaching lock that people thought, and his asking price spooked some teams, per source. Is that like, am I weird for thinking that's a little un-Schefter like unprofessional? Like, that seems a little bit like shade. Like, be like, he wasn't the lock you idiots thought. He, you know what I mean? Like,
I think that's probably coming from, Josh Harris or whatever. Right. Is like the Commanders camp of like, because Commanders fans are gonna be like, well, why didn't we hire Ben Johnson? And it's gonna be like, well, actually, he didn't actually interview that well, and he was asking for a lot of money, and he thought he was a little too big for his britches. The only
report ever on the money was I think it was Justina Anderson who reported that he wanted something like $15 million per year. That was the only.
He should ask for that. He has a lot of leverage. People want him in theory.
But
honestly, that shouldn't matter. Like, coaching salaries don't count against the salary cap. No fan should care. No fan should ever be like, well, he was asking for too much money. No, who cares? If the coach wants $100 million and he's a great coach, give it. Like, there's no salary cap. Spend whatever it takes.
So, somebody whose work we respect, Nikki Jumpvala. I know we're still waiting to make sure that that's the correct pronunciation. Apologies if it's not. Who covers the Commanders for the Washington Post? She tweeted out 15 minutes ago for you and I. She quoted her own tweet that Ben Johnson was staying in Detroit, but then she said, Ben Johnson informed the Commanders and Seahawks today, the reason, I'm told, he wants to win a Super Bowl.
Wow. That's a good reason.
Yeah. I mean,
what a novel concept.
And Ben Johnson's really young. He's going to have another opportunity.
So now that they're not going to get Ben Johnson, who do you not want the Commanders to hire? I already said that. Yeah, I don't want them to hire Mike McDonald because
that's the worst case scenario at this point.
There's just, not that I know or suspect that he's an amazing head coach, but he's been in an organization where there is good coaching, so he has some kind of background like that. and not even just the Ravens, but also obviously being around Jim Harbaugh as well. So he kind of knows what good coaching looks like at some level. And the fact that they do have this defensive, I don't know if it's just the scheme or the mindset or whatever, they have something going on defensively there. And obviously there's part of that's the Ravens are talented, but there's something going on there where it does seem to be like maybe they're on the NFL's next trend defensively. They're where Vic Fangio was years ago here. So yeah, I don't love that vision. Obviously it would then really matter who they would get as their offensive coordinator. That would be a big factor after that. And I don't know exactly who that might be off the top of my head, like who's a natural pairing at this point. I mean, maybe it'd be Brian Johnson. But,
I hope they take Dan Quinn. That's my US worst case scenario. Best case,
No.
they take Dan Quinn because he's gone from the Cowboys, although that would lead to Ron Rivera potentially. So whatever. But then that also, in my mind, look, to be very clear, I think highly of Dan Quinn, the human being, much like Ron Rivera. So I don't mean to just like trash him, whatever. But that also it like keeps that as 2 easy dubs for the Cowboys. So,
or at least you're not like scared about things being totally different. I almost think they can't make that higher because like how is that different than Ron Rivera? To your point,
no, I agree with you. Like
what,
I think they need somebody. How old is Mike McDonald? What's his?
He's probably, I'm guessing around. I feel like he's in his 30s too.
He's 36.
He's on the younger side. Yeah,
like I think like that. I don't like if you're just the Commanders are in need of like a youthful
shot in the arm. They need like some energy.
That's what I'm saying. They need a youthful movement. Like a retread head coach just feels like somebody who's just going to be there for 5 years, like Ron Rivera. And then
especially when you're coming off of that not multiple times over. I guess Jake Gruden wasn't. I miss Jake Gruden, by the way. I miss him being in the NFC East. Unusually honest head coach, and kind of been fun to see some of his stuff on Twitter where he's just also very honest and forward. Hey,
other news, the Cowboys, before we get to songs, just because it happened, the Cowboys had 3 players added to the Pro Bowl. DeMarcus Lawrence. I'm just informing you. DeMarcus Lawrence and Jake Ferguson are replacing Nick Bosa and George Kittle. And Tyler Smith is replacing Zach Martin, who is excused, I believe, because of the pending birth of his child. And Dak Prescott is also not going to participate, also due to the pending birth of his daughter. I think Baker Mayfield is who is replacing Dak. So the same Baker Mayfield who beat the Eagles in the playoffs. So are you ready for songs?
Eagles have some Pro Bowl stuff too. But
what if Bill Belichick goes to the Commanders now? What if they're that desperate?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the case.
I mean, it's possible.
I don't think they're desperate. I think they have their pick. I don't think no one doesn't want that job. I think they're just being very judicious about who they hire.
Are we ready for songs?
Sure.
Rachelle has gone with "Burnin' Up" by the Jonas Brothers, which is a great little bop. So great job by Rachelle.
The Jonas Brothers. Still around. I remember when they were kind of first a thing. I am going to go with an artist that's already on the NFC East Mixtape playlist, which I was looking at earlier today, but it's a different album, I believe. Rachelle had already put Paramore on. I am going to put another Paramore song on.
The only exception.
Going to go with All I Wanted. All I Wanted Was You is the lyric.
Okay, so putting it on right now.
But the song is called All I Wanted.
Right. Why?
It's an album closer, I believe, from the album Brand New Eyes. I love a final song on an album.
Once upon a time, for you youngins, the order of songs on an album was important. It was, it made the experience. So
that's the only way I listen to music most of the time is like an album. I listen to albums front to back most of the time. I don't listen to just playlist or. So sorry, I don't listen to the NFC East Mixtape playlist typically. That's not how I listen to music.
I'm going with a song from one of my favorite albums of all time. In fact, I don't know the album name off the top of my head.
That's high praise.
I mean, I'm not like a music connoisseur. Like I don't have the highest level of, knowledge on it. It is from One Republic's Native album. Now, One Republic, I remember a long time ago in the LimeWire Kazaa days when you would download your own music and then you would import it into
what are you talking
about? Whatever you use, like whether you had iTunes at the time, you could adjust, like the title, you could change it. I'm talking about like you could, whatever, because sometimes they had weird titles or whatever. For like 3 years, I thought One Republic was misspelled. I thought it was supposed to be 2 words, but it's not. So, fun little fact there. But I love this album. And at some point, I'll probably put the song "I Lived" on here. That's a great song, kind of like a great life anthem. But going with the song, it's 10th on the deluxe edition. So not quite the end. I'm almost a little bit past halfway through. It's called "Something I Need," and it's a great kind of I don't know what the version, like the movie version of a bridge is called, like the part of a movie that would be like the equivalent of the bridge of a song. But it's like great for that, like
the climax or the third act,
no,
or I don't know.
yeah, like where the
The
main characters
untimed,
where the main character's experiencing like internal growth, you know what I mean? And like there's maybe generally like a montage or something, and it shows them like conquering or approaching, or at least doing what they can to encounter their fears or
that's
their
more like the build-up,
insecurities.
man.
Yeah, so like it's a great kind of like
Rising action.
there we go. I don't know if that's a cinematic term, but
I think it is.
It's great for that kind of moment. So I think we're all in need of that in the NFC East. We're all down bad. Like we're all down so bad that we're just, can't believe y'all are hiring our former loser. Can't believe you're keeping your loser. Can't believe we're keeping our loser. It's like we're just power ranking losers at this point. So we need a what did you call it? A rising action?
Yeah, I'm looking up like the different terms. Like a 3-act kind of structure is typically the way it goes. It goes exposition, to start, conflict, rising action, climax,
Okay.
falling action, resolution.
By the way, Nikki also has a tweet. This is now about an hour and a half ago in terms of real time for you and I, of Dan Quinn. It looks like, this is my assumption, going through airport security on his way out, seemingly, of Washington, because she tweeted, so Dan Quinn's interview with the Commanders is clearly done. I got to give Dan some props because he's still wearing the suit. I think a lot of people would have, changed and maybe thrown on like some sweats or something like that to be more comfortable for the plane, but he still got the tie and everything. So
he's a 50-year-old man, right? Whatever.
That's just not the most comfortable, gear to fly in.
I agree, but I don't know. Sometimes you have to dress for success at all times, I guess. I don't know. I don't really subscribe to that. One Republic, same group that does apologize, right? It's too late to apologize. I never understood. Help me. Maybe I'm being obtuse, if you will, but I never understood the difference between their version of the song and then the Timbaland version that was actually, it's credited to him, Timbaland, Apologize, featuring One Republic. I felt like it's pretty much the same song, although the other one, he could kind of hear him go like, yeah, or something. Like it's like very subtle. And I feel like there are songs out there where there's like remixes, but it's not really that different. I never understand that. What's the point of that? If it's not going to be like dramatically different, why is it a remix? Why is it a different version?
I don't know the purpose behind that. I think that I'm verifying this because I don't want to be wrong. But there, yes. So no. There was a song they had. I think it was a remix on the song. You've heard the song "Good Life" that they have?
No.
It's a great song, but I think they had a remix with Kanye that was basically the same song, but that just had like a bridge that Kanye did. So I don't know if it was anything like that, but yeah.
There's some songs like that, very subtle changes.
Let's get out of here. As we do. Yeah, it was really
on a lot of things.
Really strong episode. As we leave.
What are we gonna do next week?
I don't know. I'll be in Las Vegas.
Oh yeah. Well, we can figure that out then.
We'll figure something out. Something will get done. As we leave.
We hear from the Super? So I think the idea I said to you, we should hear from the Super Bowl people. That would be Stats.
Our people.
And
Stats is gonna. Oh, actually, I guess I should tell you here. Stats is gonna be there. So, once again, everyone subscribe to the Gold Standard Network. Stats. I don't know that he's gonna sleep next week, but I'm gonna get to meet Stats in person.
Punch him in the face for me, thank you.
How tall do you think he is? I mean, I know you're 6'5", but like, how tall do you think Stats is? Because in my head, he's very tall. I think he's a tall person.
I don't think he's tiny. Yeah, I think
I'm 5'10". So do you think I'm taller than him, or same height?
I think he's taller than you.
That's my assumption too.
I'm guessing he's like 6 foot, but like not like a fake 6 foot, like a real 6 foot.
Yeah, like you're
not like these guys who are like 5'11",
right. Well, kind of like how you're like barely 6'5", similar sort of thing.
I am verified 6'9".
Well, Okay, we'll put together some kind of plan. But everybody check out the Gold Standard Network. And Brandon, as we leave, why don't you tell us something or someone who for them, someone who for them it is too late to apologize.
Oh my gosh. Wow, dramatic ending. The ref from the 2011 season NFC Championship game featuring the Giants and the 49ers, where Ahmad Bradshaw fumbled the ball clearly, and the ref blew the quickest whistle of all time to negate that fumble. And they were like, oh, we can't challenge this because they blew the whistle, even though it was incredibly clear that was a fumble. And the 49ers recovered, and they should have won that championship game. The Giants haven't won the Super Bowl. So it's very much too late for that person to apologize.